Welcome back, guys. I am very excited to bring you a very informative video today. It's going to be a learning experience for both you and I. Basically, this is what we're going to do on the Comet. I've got a set of new cylinder heads, I've got a new camshaft, but we need to figure out if everything is going to fit. And let me flip the camera around and show you why. And this is going to be for a 302 Windsor based motor, but you should be able to apply the same concept to your LS. Just about anything else that has, push rods. And this should basically teach you how to figure out if your new cam is gonna clear, if you're gonna have issues, all the stuff like that. So let me flip the camera around and show you what we're working on and the special tools that I have set up to allow us to determine what our piston-to-valve clearance is gonna be. This is a 302 Ford out of a 1986. The reason I know that it's an 86 is, well, because of these pistons. Now, normally a small block Ford would have valve reliefs in the pistons, but as you can see, this is basically a flat top with a very small valve. Well, I wouldn't call it a valve relief. This is just like a very small dish. And what this means is when we go to install our aftermarket camshaft, which is gonna have, more lift and duration, there is the possibility that the timing events are gonna be such that when the valves open, they could contact the piston. You obviously don't want that. You want clearance. Typically what I have heard is a safe number is like 100 thousandths. So let's go over the tools that you may or may not need first. I'm gonna show you everything I have on the table and why I have it, and you can decide how that you wanna do this. If you are going to use the clay method or the Play-Doh method, you wanna get yourself, go out to Target or wherever else, pick up some Play-Doh, and basically you're using this, you're gonna put, some Play-Doh on the top of the piston and then put the head on, and then you rotate the motor over, and then the valves open and close, and you measure with a set of calipers, which I should probably put out on the table here, what your thickness is. That's one way to do it. So, and that's totally fine. This is cheap. You might as well have it anyway. You want to make sure if you do go that method, you get some WD-40 or some motor oil and make sure that you coat, basically you want to coat the valves so nothing sticks. You want this to stick to the piston and stay put, but you don't want the valves yanking the Play-Doh off. So you kind of use this as like a release agent. The other tool that's very helpful to have if you're installing a camshaft yourself is an adjustable push rod. So this allows you to screw in or out and fine tune the length of your push rod to ensure that before you go out and buy push rods, you know the right length. Now, Fords versus Chevys, depending on a lot of different factors. Some cars you're gonna have the same push rod length for intake and exhaust, but it's really good to check both the intake and exhaust separately. You only need to do that on one cylinder, but a tool like this will allow you to measure the push rod length to ensure that you get the right sizes before you go ahead and order, because they come in many lengths. The other tools that you may or may not need, a set of checker springs. Now, the benefit of the checker springs is whether you're using the Play-Doh or whether you're going to use the dial indicator, which we'll talk about in a second, you install these in place of your normal valve springs, and that makes it so that you can do all this stuff and you can move the valves by hand. So I got off the Summit Racing light spring kit. There's the part number right there. If you're going to be replacing springs at any point in time, you're going to want to go ahead and get yourself a valve spring removal tool. There are many different types. This one's relatively inexpensive. I think it's about $50 to $60. And the part number's over here. So snag that from Summit Racing as well. That's going to allow me to swap out my stock springs for my checker springs, or if I determined I needed other valve springs, you could use this tool to do that. Okay, so I made a custom, quote unquote, set of solid lifters to do some checking here. So let me explain what that means. Basically, this is the old style hydraulic roller lifter that came out of the Comet. I don't want this plunger to be able to plunge. So normally this thing, when it's filled with oil, it's pretty hard, but if it's not, you can take your finger and plunge in right here. But you don't want that when you're setting your piston-to-valve clearance, because what can happen is you can get a false reading. So what I wound up doing was taking a screwdriver and I pulled out this little sort of snap ring looking thing right there. And then there's some guts inside, okay? There's a spring, not surprisingly. There's like this little cap. There's like another little ball and spring. Anyways, what I did was I took a measurement from where this plunger sat normally, and it was as measured from the edge here to this flat surface was 70 thousandths down. And basically what I did was I took all the guts out of this thing and then replaced all of the parts that, you know, plunged with solid pieces. I kind of used washers and nuts, and I grabbed, you know, a set of calipers to measure everything. And after playing around with a bunch of different little bits that are solid, I got it in there, was able to put the snap ring back in. This thing is effectively a solid lifter, and I can use it to check my clearance, and I never have to worry about turning the motor over and losing preload in my lifters and all that stuff. So go ahead and try and do that if you got a spare set of lifters. We will have to take these out. You would never run this as a solid roller. This is just for checking. I wrote S on there, and then I kind of colored in the top black so I knew that it was different. All right, so we got our camshaft here. This is a Trick Flow Stage 1 camshaft, so relatively mild cam. We've got a means to kind of clean things off, and then obviously a way to lube everything up. So we do want to make sure we get any debris or anything that could have got on this in shipping or while I was sitting in my house. You know, it was covered up, but you never know. So we got that. We got ourselves a new cam bolt, and then also we got ourselves a timing set. Now, when I purchased this timing set, I did get the kind that allows you, there's some that allow you a ton of different adjustment. This one allows, I think you can go like 4 degrees advanced, you know, regular, or 4 degrees, you can retard the cam. I will throw the camera up, most likely in a time lapse, and then get this stuff put on. You do want to use an assembly lube. You probably only really need it on the bearing journals. I went ahead and put it on everything. Probably overkill, but again, after we get this thing running, we're gonna change the oil pretty soon, just to get any of this kind of stuff out of the motor. Okay, just in case someone has never installed a cam before and didn't know what I was talking about. So basically, when you get your timing set, you've got your crank sprocket right here in my hand. You have your cam sprocket and your timing chain. Now, this is a double roller timing chain, you can tell because of the way that it is. But yeah, if you pop over here, you're gonna see what's called, you're gonna see the dot. People talk about installing things dot to dot. What does that mean? Well, let me show you. This dot right here on the cam sprocket, okay, the cam's the larger one, would correspond with the mark on the crank sprocket. Now, if you look, there's a dot right here above this one. It looks kind of like a little domed, sort of like an end of a cylinder, right? The way this keyway is cut. Now, these other ones are different. This one's like a house. This one's like a square. And if you read the instructions, what it tells you is, depending on how you install it, will affect how much your cam is either advanced or retarded. If you want to do it dot to dot, right, then what they tell you to do here is they say to use the factory keyway, which is this guy right here. That is the factory keyway. So what would happen is you would install it dot to dot, just like that, right, when it's on the motor. I think that's how we're going to start. Just 2 quick things to note here. Basically, those bolts that hold on, we'll call it, I guess, like the thrust bearing retainer, they only get torqued to 120 inch-pounds, so very light. The other thing is there's a dowel pin that goes into the end of your camshaft. Just make sure you select the right one lengthwise, depending on whether your car is carbureted or fuel injected. Okay, here's a pro tip. When you slide that dowel pin in, you might be tempted to think when you put the long one in that it's too long. But really, you just got to push that pin in a little bit further, because what happens is, and I've got the old cam up here for reference, is this is your fuel pump eccentric. This is what rotates around in a circle. Actually, it's more of like an oblong, right? And that's what presses on the little fuel pump rod, and it gives you fuel pressure. So the point that I'm trying to make here is this piece right here. And I'm just gonna set it on there without the little piece, so don't get scared. But the point is that this little thing right here fits in that little hole. Oops, it's hard to do it with the camera in my hand at the same time, like that. So now if you look, that's what keeps this thing rotating around in a circle. And if your dowel pin wasn't in far enough, it wouldn't work. So again, goes in like that, and then you can see how it's not centered in the hole, but that's what drives it. This thing spins around in a circle, and that just gives you your fuel pressure. So, okay, at this point, you kind of have to do the little timing chain shuffle. Everything sort of has to go on at the same time. You really can't slide the crank sprocket all the way on and then try and get the chain on. You kind of have to like put the chain around the crank sprocket and then in your hands, put it around the cam sprocket, and then as an assembly, slide everything in. You're gonna see me farting around a little bit with this fuel pump eccentric. It actually gave me a lot of trouble. We'll talk about it here in a second, and then likely later in the video. It's kind of a pain in the butt. We are lined up dot to dot, okay? So that is installed straight up, and the dots we're talking about, in case you guys can't see, is that dot on the cam, that on the crank, and because this is the keyway with a little dome in it, this is the original position. Now, if we run into an issue and we have to change, then what I may have to do is basically go ahead and take this off, rotate it, but we'll deal with that when we get there. Okay, now we're back inside. I've got my new cylinder heads on a table, and what I'm doing right now is I'm removing the stock valve springs so I can put in my lightweight checker springs. You'll probably see me remove some more stuff right here and take some measurements. The reason for that is kind of unrelated to this video, but I did want to have a conversation with the head manufacturer regarding the cam that I was running, just to make sure that I had enough spring pressure. So kind of disregard the spot where you see me checking with the mic. There's my cat that came by to help. But basically, you want to get the checker springs installed so that you can do all the remaining set of tests here in a second. Well, I meant to film myself putting the head on, but I forgot to hit record. So here's basically all you need to know. I'm reusing the old head gasket. I did measure it. It is thicker than the new head gasket that's going to go on. So we will probably have to take that into account. It measured closer to like 48 thousandths. I think the new one's like 41. So a little more space there. So now you can see if I take my finger at top dead center on number 1, that's how much clearance I have. Not very much. So anyways, we're gonna keep going. Things I gotta remember to do are, I gotta bolt this head down. I'm not gonna like go crazy, but just to get it snug, I do need to go in and just torque these, my guide plates. And I did confirm that you can put in the lifters with the head on, so that was a good check for me. And then I got to make up my tool and kind of start going from there. But this is where we're at right now. So we've got the cam in, we've got the heads on, we've got the checker springs in. We're getting closer, but we're going to take our time and make sure we do everything right. Okay, this video just took a turn for the worst. Basically, I had a very lofty idea of trying to follow the method that was prescribed to me by the manufacturer of these heads, which relates back to a Straub Technologies video. Has a lot to do with correcting your rocker arm geometry and all this stuff to get the optimum pushrod length. Turns out with these heads, you can't really do that. I'm not gonna dive into all those details right now, but anyways, it just didn't work. So we went back to kind of the normal way of getting your pushrod length set. We did that, and then we decided, okay, we're close enough, it's time to check for piston-to-valve clearance. And what we found out was when you install this cam dot to dot, you can't. You can install the cam, you can put the heads on, but pistons are going to hit valves. I'll show you how we were able to determine this real quick. I'll turn the camera around and we can talk to that. Okay, so what's going on here? Basically, we have the motor at top dead center. Like I said, it's installed dot to dot, so it's not advanced or retarded right now. We've got a rocker arm on, we've got the right length push rod, and basically a TDC with the intake. What I'm gonna show you here is, this is the clearance we have at top dead center. Okay, not a ton, like 78, 80 thousandths, okay? That's not a bunch, and that kind of made me a little bit worried. Basically what happens is you continue to turn the engine over, right as the intake valve starts to open. The intake valve is chasing the piston down. It basically opens too soon, and because of that, the intake valve hits the piston, and you can tell there's absolutely no clearance. You press this, it doesn't go anywhere. The exhaust valve is super tight too. Even if the intake didn't hit, the exhaust is kind of too close to comfort. So all we can do right now is we are going to, I got a harmonic balancer puller, rented that guy from O'Reilly. It's that part number, and we're gonna pull the balancer off. I've got the balancer installed with like a makeshift pointer right here. Just so I can kind of get an idea for where the collisions occur and stuff like that. But we're gonna pull this off. We're gonna retime it by retarding the cam, and then we're gonna go ahead and try this again, and we are gonna see if we can't get lucky. We'll see. At this point, you're probably getting tired of watching me install the cam, but basically I pulled the balancer off. I'm gonna pull the timing set off. I'm gonna move it to another keyway, and then I'm gonna realign everything based on the instructions from Cloys, and try this again and see if I can get lucky, and by advancing or retarding the timing, basically get it so I don't have a piston-to-valve clearance issue. Well, it's another day. I'd be lying if I told you that I got good sleep, because I didn't. The shop is a mess. The car is still apart, and we've got some hard decisions ahead of us. Let me flip the camera around real quick. I'll keep talking just so you have something to look at. I honestly kind of don't know what to do from here. Let me show you what I mean. So as you saw yesterday, we went ahead. I guess I should point out real quick, you don't need the harmonic balancer on when you're doing this, but I made up a makeshift pointer, and I'm using the balancer just so I can see kind of in terms of degrees of rotation where my issues are occurring. So right now, we've got, you know, everything set up on the exhaust side, and we're at like, I don't know, what is that? Like 10-ish degrees before top dead center. Look at this. I mean, it's basically not even moving. If we're not colliding there, we're just about to. And what I found was when I changed the timing on the intake side, instead of my collision occurring pretty far before top dead center, it happened like 10 to 15 degrees after top dead center, which is basically trick flow is like you want to look between 15 degrees and before and 15 degrees after. And when you play this game with the timing, you kind of will help yourself in one spot and make it worse in another. So basically, the scenario is it's not going to work. Not with these pistons, not with this cam, not with these heads. If it were any other year of short block and it had valve reliefs in the pistons, this is considered a very small cam, and I would be totally fine. If I had the trick flow cylinder heads, which have a different angle on the valve, I would also likely be totally fine. Those are really good heads, but they are a lot more expensive. So where do we go from here? Because the whole point of this project and the whole point of this car was something that was fun and inexpensive, okay? And at this point, it's quickly looking like it could turn into something that, while still being fun, could get a lot more expensive, right? I just can't justify going out and spending thousands of dollars on those really nice trick flow cylinder heads for a car that, yeah, with better heads, and you could put a bigger cam in it, right, is gonna go and make, you know, more power, right? You know, instead of making 300 wheel horsepower, if you had those heads and maybe like a stage 2 cam or something like that from trick flow, you know, maybe you're making well over 350 wheel horsepower, which is awesome, but it's just, I can't justify spending that money on this, not when I have, you know, this other car here. So that's kind of out. I wish there was another cam out there, and maybe I'll talk to some people and see if there's another cam that I can try and purchase that will work with this. But basically, yeah, it's hitting with this cam. So this, you know, and going smaller with an off-the-shelf grind cam is almost non-existent. This is a pretty tame cam as far as they go. So that's kind of a bummer too. They do make a tool that allows you to fly cut your pistons with everything installed. That just seems like a lot of risk to me. Not that I don't think I would be able to do it. Well, there may not actually be enough room in the engine bay to even do that, getting a drill in there and everything like that. So it's just, that's a whole pain. You know, you could pull the pistons out and get different pistons. But again, now we're just starting to rack up costs on something that was supposed to be a quick and easy sort of deal, right? Installing a cam should not be this difficult, and it generally isn't. So there is the possibility, and I hate to say this, but there is the possibility I decide to put this thing all the way back together. It was a great running car before, put it all back together as it was, and maybe the Comet with this setup just isn't the vehicle for me right now. You know, maybe we wind up selling this and then down the road picking up something a little bit different. You know, now that I don't have the lift and everything like that, it really just affects everything. If I was at my old place, I had the lift, all that stuff, it makes it a lot easier. But we talk about swapping motors and all those things. It's like, I can do it, but it's just the time and the effort and the money, and it's like, what are you trying to get? What's the end result here? So I'm definitely kicking myself up, to be honest, right now for doing this. Kind of wish I would have left it all together. It was running perfectly fine. So it's gonna cost me money either way. You know, if I put it back together right now, I can't reuse all these old stuff. I'm gonna put some of the new things I've, you know, purchased for it, the timing set, of course, other things. I'm gonna reuse that stuff, right? But yeah, just an absolute pain. So anyways, let me know what you guys think I should do, but hopefully you guys found this video informative. It taught you how to install a cam. It taught you how to check timing. So hopefully you like this. And if you have any tips or ideas for me, hit me up in the comments. And really, please subscribe. I really appreciate it. It helps when you guys come back and watch my videos. So hopefully next time we've got better news, and we will see you again on another episode of Truck and Roll.